I have always hidden inside metaphors. When other people speak, they use words to communicate concrete ideas. When I speak, I wrap everything in layers of imagery and symbolism until the truth is buried so deep that no one can find it. It is a defense mechanism. It is also the reason I am a poetry major. Poetry is the only place where obscurity is valued, where saying something without saying it is considered skill rather than cowardice. My name is Willow. I am 21 years old. I am a senior literature major with a concentration in contemporary poetry. I live in an apartment that smells of old books and burnt coffee. I wear the same black jeans and oversized cardigans every day. I have headphones permanently attached to my ears playing ambient music at a volume just loud enough to drown out the world. I carry a battered moleskin notebook everywhere I go. The pages are filled with fragments of poems and half-finished thoughts written in pencil because pen feels too permanent, too committed. I write poetry the way other people breathe. Constantly, unconsciously. I write on the bus. I write in line at the coffee shop. I write in the margins of my textbooks during lectures. Most of it is terrible. Self-indulgent garbage about alienation and loneliness and all the cliché things that 21-year-olds write about when they think their pain is unique. But sometimes I write something true. And that is dangerous. I am in love with my professor. Her name is Dr. Sloan Bennett. She teaches contemporary poetry and critical theory. She is 36 years old. She dresses entirely in black. Black turtlenecks, black tailored pants, black leather boots. She looks like she stepped out of a French New Wave film. She has dark hair cut in a sharp bob that frames her face like parentheses. She wears red lipstick that is always perfect. She has a sarcastic wit that could cut glass. Dr. Bennett is a legend in the English department. She published 2 collections of poetry in her 20s. They were critically acclaimed, dark, confessional, raw. And then she stopped. She pivoted to academia and never published creatively again. When students ask her why she quit writing, she says that she got tired of bleeding onto the page. She says it with a smile, but there is something painful underneath it. Her classes are brutal. She destroys egos with surgical precision. She will read a student's poem aloud and then dissect every line, explaining exactly why it does not work. She is not cruel for the sake of cruelty. She is honest. And honesty in creative writing feels like violence. Half the students drop her class in the first 2 weeks. The other half worship her. I am in the worshiping half. I fell in love with her the first time she tore apart one of my poems. It was the second week of the semester. We were workshopping student submissions. She read my poem aloud. It was about feeling invisible. Very subtle. Very original. When she finished reading, she looked up at the class. This poem is afraid of itself. She tapped the paper with her pen. The writer is using metaphor as camouflage, hiding behind images of fog and empty rooms, but metaphor without precision is just obscurity. And obscurity is not depth. It is cowardice. The class was silent. I wanted to sink through the floor. She looked directly at me. You have talent, Willow. But talent without courage is just wasted potential. If you are going to write about invisibility, then commit to it. Make me feel the absence. Make me ache with it. Don't just gesture vaguely in its direction. She handed the poem back to me. I want to see what you can do when you stop hiding. I nodded. I could not speak. My face was burning, but something shifted in that moment. She saw through me. She saw the fear underneath the words. And instead of dismissing me, she challenged me. I spent the rest of the semester trying to write something that would make her feel something. And somewhere along the way, I fell in love. Not with the idea of her. Not with the professor persona. With her. With the way she tilted her head when she was thinking. With the way she tapped her pen against her lips during class discussions. With the way her voice softened when she read Sylvia Plath aloud. With the way she looked at poetry like it was holy. I wrote about her constantly. I filled my notebook with poems that were transparently obviously about her. A woman in black, a voice like dark chocolate, hands that held words like weapons. I was not subtle. But I told myself it did not matter because she would never read them. They were private. They were just for me. Until they were not. The final assignment for the semester was to submit one original poem to the class collection. The best submissions would be selected for the University Literary Journal. It was due at the end of October. I had been working on my poem for weeks. It was the most honest thing I had ever written. It was about longing, about watching someone from a distance and memorizing the small details of their existence, about loving someone in silence because speaking would shatter the fragile equilibrium. It was about her, obviously about her, painfully about her. But I had wrapped it in enough metaphorical language that I convinced myself it was safe. I used imagery of winter and distant light and unreachable stars. I never used her name. I never used gendered pronouns. I left it ambiguous enough that it could be about anyone. That was what I told myself when I submitted it. The truth was that I wanted her to read it. I wanted her to see it and recognize herself in it. I wanted her to know without me having to say it out loud. I submitted the poem on a Friday afternoon. I dropped the printed copy into the submission box outside her office. My hands were shaking. I walked away before I could change my mind. The weekend passed in a haze of anxiety. I checked my email obsessively. I imagined every possible response. She would love it. She would hate it. She would call me into her office. She would ignore it. She would recognize herself and be flattered. She would recognize herself and be horrified. Monday arrived. I walked into class with my stomach in knots. I sat in my usual seat in the third row by the window. The classroom was small, an old seminar room with wooden desks arranged in a circle. There were 30 of us in the class. Mostly seniors, a few graduate students. Everyone was chatting before class started. Dr. Bennett walked in exactly at 9 a.m. She was wearing a black turtleneck and black pants and her red lipstick. She set her leather bag on the desk. She pulled out a stack of papers. Good morning. Today we are going to workshop some of the submissions for the final assignment. I have selected a few that demonstrate particularly effective use of metaphor and imagery. My heart stopped. She was going to workshop the submissions. In class. Out loud. I looked at the stack of papers in her hand. I tried to see if mine was in there. I could not tell. She picked up the first paper. This first one is an excellent example of sustained metaphor. The writer uses the image of a garden in winter to explore themes of dormancy and potential. She started reading. It was not mine. I exhaled. I was safe. For now. She finished reading the first poem. The class discussed it. She moved on to the second, also not mine. Then she picked up the third paper. This one is particularly strong. The use of light and distance creates a palpable sense of longing. Listen to how the writer builds tension through repetition and restraint. She started reading. I knew within the first line that it was mine. My vision tunneled. The room tilted. I gripped the edge of my desk. She was reading my poem. The poem about her. Out loud. To the entire class. Her voice filled the room. She read slowly, with emphasis. She understood the rhythm. She understood where the breaks were meant to land. She was reading it the way I heard it in my head when I wrote it. I cannot transcribe the whole poem here. But the key images were these. A figure in black standing in winter light. The way cold makes everything sharper. The distance between warmth and wanting. The act of watching someone and learning their patterns. The way certain voices could rewrite your internal monologue. The impossibility of speaking when silence had become a language. It was romantic, it was yearning, it was desperate. And it was so obviously about her that I could not believe I ever thought I could hide it. As she read, I watched the class. I watched their faces. I saw the moment they started to understand. I saw eyes widen. I saw someone glance at Dr. Bennett and then glance at me. I saw the realization spread like a ripple through the room. They knew. They all knew. Doctor. Bennett finished reading the last line. She looked up. She looked at the class. She did not look at me. What do we notice about the metaphorical structure here? Silence. No one wanted to speak. The air was thick with tension. Finally, one of the graduate students raised his hand. His name was Marcus. He was pretentious and loved the sound of his own voice. The central conceit is the unreachable object. The figure in black is positioned as something to be observed but not approached. The speaker is trapped in the role of witness. Dr. Bennett nodded. Good. What does that tell us about the speaker? Another student, a girl named Sophia. The speaker is afraid. Afraid of rejection, or maybe afraid of the vulnerability that comes with confession. Dr. Bennett tapped the paper. Exactly. This is a poem about distance. But the distance is not physical. It is emotional. The speaker has created the distance as protection. She paused. This is beautiful work. The restraint is effective. But I would challenge the writer to ask themselves what happens when the distance collapses. What happens when metaphor becomes reality? She set the paper down. The writer is in this room. My blood turned to ice. She looked around the circle. Her eyes moved from face to face. She stopped when she reached me. Willow, this is yours. Is it not? It was not a question. I could not speak. I nodded. A tiny jerky movement. The room was silent. 30 pairs of eyes turned to look at me. Doctor, Bennett held my gaze. Would you read it for us? I want the class to hear it in the writer's voice. No. The word came out as a whisper. She tilted her head. No? I cannot. Why not? Because. I could not finish the sentence. Because it is about you. Because everyone will know. Because I will die of humiliation. She waited. The silence stretched. It was unbearable. Finally, I stood up. My legs were shaking. I walked to the front of the room. She handed me the paper. My own words printed in 12-point font. My handwriting in the margins where I had made last-minute edits. I stood at the front of the circle. I looked at the paper. The words blurred. I looked up. I looked at her. She was sitting in the front row now. She was watching me with an expression I could not read. I took a breath. I started to read. My voice shook at first. But as I read, I found the rhythm. I fell into the cadence. I remembered why I wrote these words. I remembered the feeling I was trying to capture. I read about the figure in black. I read about winter light. I read about the way certain people change the temperature of a room just by entering it. I read about silence as a form of devotion. I read about watching someone and knowing you would never be able to explain the depth of what you felt, so you stopped trying. I read every word. When I finished, I could not look up. I stared at the paper in my hands. The silence was deafening. Finally, Dr. Bennett spoke. Thank you, Willow. Her voice was soft, unreadable. You can sit down. I walked back to my seat. My legs barely held me. I sat down and stared at my desk. Dr. Bennett stood up. She walked back to the front of the room. Let us talk about specificity. This poem is effective because the details are precise. The writer does not say, I love you. The writer shows us what love looks like. The observations, the attention, the way someone becomes a fixed point in your universe. She continued to lecture. She talked about the craft of the poem, the technical choices, the line breaks, the use of white space. She did not say it was about her, but she did not need to. Everyone knew. The class ended. Everyone packed up quickly. No one looked at me. They all fled the room like it was on fire. Dr. Bennett stood at her desk organizing papers. Willow. Stay for a moment, please. My stomach dropped. I stayed in my seat. I waited while the last students filed out. The door closed. We were alone. She did not look at me. She continued shuffling papers. That was brave. I did not feel brave. I felt like I was going to vomit. I did not mean for it to be workshopped. I thought it would just go into the submission pile. I know. She finally looked at me. But it was exceptional. It deserved to be heard. Now everyone knows. She tilted her head. Knows what? I stared at her. Was she really going to make me say it? Knows that it is about you. She did not deny it. She just looked at me with those dark eyes. Is it? Yes. She was quiet for a long moment. It is a beautiful poem, Willow. That is not an answer. She sighed. She sat down on the edge of her desk. What do you want me to say? I do not know. She crossed her arms. You put me in an impossible position. You wrote a love poem about your professor. You submitted it to a class assignment. You read it aloud in front of 30 witnesses. What am I supposed to do with that? I felt tears prick my eyes. I am sorry. Do not apologize for your art. The poem is good. It might be the best thing you have written. Then what is the problem? She looked tired suddenly. The sarcastic armor fell away, and underneath was something raw. The problem is that I am your professor. The problem is that there are rules. The problem is that even if I wanted to respond, I cannot. Not here. Not now. If you wanted to, I repeated. She did not answer. Go home, Willow. The semester ends in 3 weeks. After that, I am no longer your professor. She stood up. She gathered her things. I walked out of the classroom in a daze. The next 3 weeks were torture. The poem had spread through the department like wildfire. Everyone knew. People whispered when I walked by. Some looked at me with pity, some with judgment, some with fascination like I was a character in a novel they were reading. Dr. Bennett acted like nothing had happened. She taught class normally. She was professional. She did not single me out. She did not avoid me. She treated me exactly like every other student. It was worse than anger. It was absence. I stopped writing. My notebook stayed closed. I could not put words on the page because every word felt like a confession I had already made. Finals came and went. I turned in my final paper. I did not go to her office hours. I avoided eye contact in class. The semester ended on a Friday in mid-December. Snow had started to fall. The campus was empty. Everyone was going home for winter break. I packed up my apartment. I was planning to go back to my parents' house for 3 weeks. I needed distance. I needed to stop thinking about her. On Saturday morning, I walked to the campus bookstore to return some textbooks. On my way out, I passed the display for the new issue of the literary journal. It had just been published, the fall issue. I had forgotten that the submissions were supposed to be in there. I picked up a copy. I flipped through it. My poem was there, page 47. They had titled it, Figure in Winter Light. My name was underneath, Willow Chen. I stared at it. Seeing it in print made it real, permanent. I kept flipping through the journal. The faculty submission section was near the back. There were usually only 1 or 2. Most professors did not bother submitting creative work. They were too busy with academic publishing. But this issue had 3 faculty submissions. The last one was on page 72. The title was, Answer to a Question I Was Not Supposed to Hear. The byline said, S.B. Sloan Bennett. My heart stopped. I stood in the middle of the bookstore and I read. The poem was written in response to mine. It used the same imagery. Winter, light, distance. But it was inverted. The speaker was the figure in black, the one being watched, the one being written about. The speaker described the awareness of being observed, the weight of someone's attention, the fear of being seen too clearly, the desire to turn around and close the distance but being frozen by rules and roles and the consequences of wanting something you were not supposed to want. The last stanza was addressed to W. It asked a question. What happens when the watcher and the watched both want the same thing? What happens when silence becomes unbearable? What happens when the semester ends and the distance is no longer mandatory? It was a confession, written in code, published for anyone to read. I bought 3 copies of the journal. I walked back to my apartment in the snow. I read the poem 12 times. She had answered. Not privately, not safely. She had answered publicly, in print, for the entire department to see. She had taken the same risk I took, maybe a bigger one. I grabbed my phone. I opened my email. I started typing. I deleted it. I could not do this over email. I pulled on my coat. I walked across campus to the Humanities building. It was Saturday. The building was mostly empty. I took the elevator to the 4th floor. I walked down the hallway to her office. The door was closed. The light was off. She was not there. I stood in the hallway holding the journal. I did not know what to do. Then I heard footsteps. I turned. She was walking down the hallway towards me. She was wearing a long black coat and a scarf. Her hair was damp from the snow. She was carrying a leather bag and a coffee cup. She stopped when she saw me. Willow. Hi. We stood there. The journal was in my hand. She could see it. You read it, she said. Yes. And I do not know what to say. She walked closer. She stopped a few feet away. You do not have to say anything. I said it for both of us. Why did you publish it? Because you were brave, and I was tired of being a coward. She unlocked her office door. She pushed it open. Come in. I followed her inside. She turned on the lamp. The office glowed with warm light. She set down her bag. She took off her coat. She turned to face me. The semester is over. You are no longer my student for that class. The grade is already submitted. There is no conflict of interest. Technically. Technically. She smiled. A small, real smile. I stopped writing poetry 15 years ago because I got tired of exposing myself. I got tired of people reading my work and thinking they knew me. I got tired of being vulnerable for public consumption. Why did you start again? She took a step closer. Because you wrote something so honest, it made me remember why I loved poetry in the first place. Because you took a risk and I realized I had been playing it safe for too long. Because I am 36 years old and I am tired of pretending I do not feel things. She reached out. She took the journal from my hands. She set it on the desk. Because I have been in love with you since October, and I did not know how to tell you without breaking every rule I have spent my career following. I stared at her. You are in love with me. Yes. Since October. Yes. Why did you not say anything? Because I am your professor. Because you are 21. Because I convinced myself it was inappropriate and unethical and I should ignore it. But you wrote the poem. She nodded. I wrote the poem. Because apparently I am just as much of a disaster as you are. I started laughing. I could not help it. It was a broken, relieved sound. She started laughing too. This is insane, I said. I know. Everyone is going to know. They already know. Your poem made sure of that. I am sorry. She reached out and touched my face. Her hand was warm. Do not be sorry. Be proud. You wrote a love poem so good it made a retired poet come out of retirement just to answer it. That is a hell of an accomplishment. I leaned into her hand. What happens now? She pulled me closer. She looked into my eyes. Now we figure out what poetry looks like when it is not just metaphor, when it is real life, messy and complicated and public. She leaned in, and I finally kissed the girl who has been writing about me for 4 months. She kissed me. It was soft and careful and tasted like coffee in winter. When we pulled apart, she rested her forehead against mine. This is going to be complicated, I know. The department is going to talk. Let them. She smiled. You are trouble, Willow. You like trouble. I do. Apparently. She kissed me again. Longer this time. When we finally broke apart, I picked up the journal from her desk. I opened it to her poem. Can I keep this? She laughed. I bought 10 copies. I was planning to hide them in a drawer and never show anyone. So yes, you can keep it. I am going to frame it. You are ridiculous. I am in love with you. She pulled me close again. I know. You made that very clear in iambic pentameter. Are you going to critique my meter right now? Always. I am a professor. It is what I do. I kissed her to shut her up. We stood in her office in the golden lamplight while snow fell outside the window. 2 poets, 2 confessions, 1 public, 1 printed. The metaphor had collapsed into reality, and reality was better than any poem I could write. My professor made me read my love poem aloud, and she realized it was about her. 3 weeks later, she wrote one back. And that is how 2 cowards learn to be brave, 1 stanza at a time.